once again for tuning in to an episode of Who Gives a Dram. We're here with episode, 107, I think. It's the last episode of 2022. We're closing out the show with the third annual 2022 Who Gives a Dram Whiskey Awards. And I got a whole list of the award winners here. We're doing movies, MMA, and whiskey this year. So I've got a lot of stuff to tell you guys what I like the best. Before getting into the podcast, I hope you guys had a wonderful Christmas. I hope you enjoyed the holidays with your friends, family, whoever you spend the time with. I hope that you enjoyed the time off. I know I had a fantastic holiday. One of the things that we did during Christmas, or that I did, is I got some new podcast equipment. So I'm sure you can see if you're watching this on YouTube, and hopefully you can tell the difference on audio. But I got fitted with a whole brand new setup for podcasters out there, for people that are actually into podcasting and audio production, things of that nature. I'm using the Rode Pod mic now, paired with the Rodecaster Pro 2. Santa was kind enough to bring me that for Christmas this year, and I'm still working out the kinks of how to use it. It's kind of out of my realm of expertise, but I'm learning a little bit more every day. I was able to connect the mic to the Rodecaster, which is fairly simple, but then correctly connecting the Rodecaster with my computer was a whole different story. Now, I still have a lot to learn with this. This is an expensive toy for me, so we're gonna make this podcast bigger and better in 2023, along with Bourbon with Friends. So, but everybody seemed to be sick again this holiday season, and not like sick like last year. Like COVID went through everybody last year. If you remember, the first episodes of 2022 on Who Gives a Dram were the COVID Chronicles. So, knock on wood, that won't happen again this year, because although people were sick, I feel like they just weren't as sick as they were last year. So that's good. That's very good. We got the new year coming up as well, man. I am so ready for 2023 to start. And there was nothing wrong with 2022. If we're going to recap 2022 just a little bit, it was the year of new adventures for me. It was the year of traveling. It was the year of podcasting. And it was the year of, kind of opening myself up to new experiences. And I'm very thankful for the people in my life that allowed that to happen. Namely my parents, just for aiding me in my journey. Obviously my buddy Paul, my brother Paul, for joining Bourbon with Friends with me. And all the people, the team over at Bourbon with Friends that has helped Paul and I get to where we are. All the guests this past year, 2022. I'm gonna miss a few. I should have written them down, but Kale was on more than anybody. We had Ryan on, my cousin Ryan. We had Amy, Liquid Pharmacist. We had Ryan, that one dude Ryan. We had my Canadian boys, Mike and Daryl, for the Canadian Takeover Part 2. Oh man, I'm sure I'm forgetting somebody. I don't want to forget anyone. Hold on, let me go through my episode list this year. Nick Bossy last week, of course. I knew I was forgetting somebody super obvious. Nick Bossy last week. I hope you enjoyed that episode, because not only was it a fantastic episode, but it took me a goddamn long time to edit it. So I hope you watched it on YouTube, and if you didn't, go over, watch it, subscribe, like the video, and leave a comment. Ryan Fuller, Baltimore Orioles hitting coach, one of my very good friends that I've known for over 10 years. Having him on the show was a great honor and a long time coming, and he will 100% be joining next year at some point. Now that I have an official setup, and once I get a few more mics, we'll be able to sit down wherever and have perfect quality audio. Just got to work on the video because I still use my iPhone. Who else did we have on? That might be it. Oh, we had Jen Brandt, Luca Mariano Distillery Master Blender, another very good friend of mine. Shout out to her. She got engaged recently. So, Jen, if you're listening, you're the best. And Luca Mariano is one of my favorite craft distilleries up and coming. They have incredible whiskey that I drink fairly often, to be completely honest with y'all. Like I drink Luca Mariano as like a just a nightcap pretty often. Now, does it help? I have about 100 bottles. Yes, but that's neither here nor there. We had Tony on Barrel Proof Baseball Podcast. Tony is another very good friend of mine, and he was actually the first guest of 2022, which is probably why I didn't remember he was on. But looking back at that episode, if you guys haven't listened to the episode with Tony, it's episode 65. Go check it out because we talk. If you're a baseball fan, you're going to want to listen because obviously he's a professional baseball coach. But we talk a lot of whiskey, a lot of funny stories, and Tony, again, another very, very good friend of mine. Happy that guy's in my life. And a whole lot of whiskey reviews, kind of shifted into more stuff that I like with MMA and movies, which is going to continue to happen in 2023. And the main thing, other than the traveling and the success of Bourbon with Friends this year, is the success of Who Gives a Dram. The unexpected success of being number 1 in Australia, number 1 in the UK, number 1 in Canada, and number 2 in the United States. Now, the way the rankings work, they update every like 12 hours or so. So it was just for a little bit of time, but we got to the point where we were one of the most popular whiskey podcasts in the world. And that is an incredible honor to me because that doesn't happen that doesn't happen because of me. That happens because of you guys who listen and download and support the show and who enjoy listening to me talk about whiskey and talk about the stuff that I love to do. So for that, I greatly appreciate each and every one of you listening, and I hope you continue to listen in 2023 because we are not even close to being started yet. Your boy's 26. I might be the youngest in the whiskey game, or at least one of the youngest. My boy Chris over at Whiskey Noobs he's either a little bit younger or a little bit older than me. I forgot which one, but sorry, I had to take a sip of water. I love my new mic, man. It's not so. I loved my Yeti Blue, right? I'm still on my boom arm, but it was getting annoying just having to always have it in my face. This, I can have it in front of me, I can have it to the side, and this audio quality is so much better. The Yeti Blue is a fantastic mic, but this is $100. The Yeti Blue is like $150 at least, and Yeti Blue is USB, which has this is all phantom power, XLR cables, a little bit more intricate of a process. So, I can't wait till I have this Rodecaster figured out and we can have like a soundboard and a lot of cool things. But nonetheless, was there anything else that I wanted to talk about? Christmas done. Giants had a pretty upsetting loss with a franchise record field goal from the Vikings, but I'm still liking our playoff hopes. I think we can get a W versus the Colts, especially without Jonathan Taylor. And that last game versus the Eagles, hopefully they play their backups and we can pull out a last game victory there. If we win the next 2 games, we're going to make the playoffs. So that's all I care about is making the playoffs at this point. Where we go in the playoffs, it doesn't matter. But to go from 4 wins last year to a playoff team this year is very impressive. Even an 8-win team this year is very impressive. So the Red Sox got rid of Xander Bogaerts and also JD Martinez. Now, I am not privy to the minor league system the Red Sox currently have. It could be fantastic, but from what I can tell, it looks like the Red Sox just don't want to pay their star players, and it seems like the Fenway ownership group wants to, get that NBA team in Las Vegas over building out the Red Sox. So It's disappointing to see Xandar go. We had at one point Mookie Betts, Xandar Bogaerts, and Rafael Devers, three of the top players in the league. Still, we let two of them go because of money. Devers is probably right behind them if I had to guess, which is just incredibly disappointing. But we have that stud, I believe is Japanese player that we just signed to a $100 million contract. So hopefully, he's good. I have to do a little bit of more research on him, but hopefully he performs, and hopefully the Red Sox can do better than last year. But we'll see. Only time will tell. The Boston Celtics are absolutely destroying it right now. I watched most of their game on Christmas versus the Bucks, and Jaylen Brown just going off, Jason Tatum going off. I like to watch the Celtics when they're good. That's admittedly the only time I watch basketball. I like to watch the Celtics. I'll watch the Celtics if they're on, even if they're bad. But now that they're good, like I watched every single NBA Finals game last year. I'm sure we talked about it on the podcast. I'm sure the Celtics will not only make it to the playoffs, but make a run in the playoffs. So we'll probably be talking about it again this summer. But watching the Celtics when they're good is very fun, especially when they have a young core of players, Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, along with veterans like Al Horford, Marcus Smart, etc. I also like to watch the Warriors, to be honest, because I think Steph Curry will go down as the greatest basketball player of all time. And I'll tell you why. Most three-pointers by a long shot. He's going to have, I don't know where he is on all-time points list, but he's, low 30s in age, maybe mid-30s. He still has 5 years at least. And, we'll see where he ends up. If he gets another championship or another MVP, I think it's game over. But if he gets another championship, league MVP, and finals MVP, then I think it's an even stronger argument. But he's definitely top 5 players of all time currently, I think, in my humble opinion, because the main reason why I think that is because Steph Curry has single-handedly changed the game of basketball. I mean, it is now a three-point palooza in the NBA. Whereas before Steph Curry, you had your three-point shooters, Ray Allen, Kyle Korver, I think that's his name. You had these people who could shoot the three, but since Steph came along and then Clay right behind him, it's been 3 points only. That's the main. I mean, games are 150 to 140 now. Like, you don't get there by not shooting threes. So Steph Curry single-handedly has changed the game of basketball more than anybody since Michael Jordan. LeBron didn't really change anything. He's just so dominant in what is already there. But Steph Curry changed basketball. And I think that has to be considered when you're talking about the GOAT. He's not the GOAT yet. I wouldn't say he's top 5 yet, but he's close. He's definitely top 10. But yeah, I didn't want to talk about basketball that much, but I'm really not a basketball guy, even though I was the captain of my undefeated Mystic Middle School basketball team in 2009. No big deal. But let's get into the awards now. So here's how we're going to do it. I selected 9 categories, two movie and television categories, 4 MMA categories, and 3 whiskey categories. We're going to go movie of the year. We're going to go TV show of the year. We're going to go knockout of the year, submission of the year, fight of the year, and fighter of the year. And then we're going to go best bang for your buck whiskey. We're going to go most surprising dram. And then we're going to go to the 2022 whiskey of the year. Now, the whiskeys are going to be whiskeys that I drank on the show. So it is limited, but I think we should recap the year on Who Gives a Dram. I'm sure William LaRue Weller would be bet whiskey of the year every year, but A, I don't own it. B, I've never had it on the show, and C, I've never had it. So, these are going to be whiskeys that I've had on the show, so there's record of me drinking them. And we'll just kick it right off. Let me get some water here first. All right. So to start the 2022 Who Gives a Dram Awards, we're going to go with the movie of the year. Now, movies were interesting this year because there weren't that many good ones. There were a lot of shitty movies this year. This was not the year for film. I think next year we're gonna see a lot of good movies. I have a lot of hope for next year. But this year was it wasn't tough picking the movie of the year, but I wanted to throw in a few honorable mentions, and I can only think of one legit one, and then I threw another one in for the hell of it. Honorable mention, we're going to put The Batman. Just a perfect representation of a young, confused, angry Bruce Wayne in a separate universe from what we're used to. Incredible storytelling. Just an incredible story, an incredible performance from Paul Dano as the Riddler, incredible performance from Robert Pattinson as Bruce Wayne. The Batsuit was sick. The fight scenes were really good. The score was impeccable. I think the Batman theme song this year for this year's movie was my number 3 on my Spotify Wrapped for songs of the year. So the Batman had to be up there. It was one of the best movies of the year. And the fact that it grossed, I think, over 700 million worldwide for a independent, Batman film that wasn't part of the greater DCEU with all the problems that that DC is facing right now, I consider that a win. It was definitely my most anticipated movie this year. But the movie of the year, one more honorable mention. I wanted to put the movie Ambulance by Michael Bay, starring Jake Gyllenhaal, the guy who plays Black Manta in Aquaman, and one of the most attractive people on planet Earth. I forgot her name, but she has the sharpest jawline in the history of jawlines, comparable to Cillian Murphy's jawline. And I watched it on the plane, I think, from Kentucky, and then I finished it when I was coming back home, one of the times I went there. And I was thoroughly surprised with how good the story was. Jake Gyllenhaal is a stud in whatever he's in, so that didn't surprise me. And it was actually well acted. It was a cool storyline for Michael Bay, and I really enjoyed it. So The Batman and Ambulance are my 2 honorable mentions for movie of the year. But the movie of the year is very obvious. Let's be honest, people. I don't need to go into that much detail. This movie made all the money. I think it's probably still making money in theaters. I think they re-released it for Christmas and probably made a few $1 million. Top Gun Maverick is by far the movie of the year, it's probably so far the movie of the decade. And I wouldn't be entirely surprised if it stays that way. I know we still have 8 years left, or 7 years basically now, but Tom Cruise being able to do what he did over 20 years after the sequel, after almost 30 years after the sequel, and making all the money and actually having a legitimate great story and legitimate great acting from him, Jennifer Connelly, Miles Teller, was just something to behold. And I loved in the summertime going through the entire Top Gun Maverick phase. Admittedly, I jumped on the bandwagon very late. I didn't watch it until well after it was available on home release. And I deeply regret it. If I could go back and watch a movie this year in theaters, I would go see Top Gun Maverick in IMAX. Just a fantastic movie, a fantastic experience, and my 2022 movie of the year. So, Top Gun Maverick, you should probably put that on your IMDb. That's a pretty big deal coming from the Who Gives A Dram Awards. Let's move on to TV Show of the Year. I had the opposite. TV this year was the opposite of movies. There was so much good TV. I had trouble narrowing down some honorable mentions because there was so many things that I enjoyed watching. We talked about almost all of them on the show, and TV this year was just so good, and TV in general is so good. I didn't watch Better Call Saul. I haven't watched it. I'm sure I will, but how many people are saying Better Call Saul is a top 5 show of all time? I can't have that on my list because I've never seen it, but how many people are saying all these movies? Succession, I think, is another one. whatever the show is with Derek from Step Brothers. Uh, there are so many good TV shows. Wednesday, Netflix. It's like one of the most streamed TV shows of all time already. Haven't seen it yet. I'll probably watch that around like Halloween next year. But some of my honorable mentions for TV show of the year. First and foremost, I have to give respect where respect is due. Peaky Blinders Season 6. I've been on record. I've said it on the show before. Peaky Blinders is my favorite TV show of all time. I have seen Peaky Blinders more times than I can count. I think Tommy Shelby is the greatest written character in history of TV. And I think the entire tone of Peaky Blinders, it was a huge catalyst into me getting into whiskey and having this podcast in the first place. I think Cillian Murphy is one of the greatest living and working actors that we have, and I'm incredibly excited to see him in Oppenheimer next year. Talk about most anticipated movies 2023. Oppenheimer is way up there. Top 5 for me, probably, after the trailer. The trailer looks sick. Peaky Blinders Season 6, on a rewatch, it 100% lived up to the hype. It just had a little bit of things that I didn't like as much as seasons 3 and 4, which I think were the best seasons of the show. Season 5 was great. Season 2 and 1 and 2 were also great, but season 4 is the best season of Peaky Blinders without a doubt. Season 6 was a great way to end it. I'm very happy with how it ended, with Tommy Shelby shooting Michael in the head and then leading to the eventual Peaky Blinders movie that will be coming out. Who knows, but I'm pretty sure that's confirmed. So I had to put it on there. It wasn't the best show of the year, but Peaky Blinders Season 6 is 100% honorable mention. I had to put Stranger Things Season 4. I mean, we all watched that, and it was fantastic. Stranger Things just keeps on getting better and better and better, and Stranger Things Season 5 will be, again, probably Netflix's most watched show, when it comes out. So I really enjoyed Max during the season with her, Running Up the Hill was one of my top stream songs on Spotify. Again, I really like that song. But I'm also a big 80s song guy. Like, I really like 80s music. So Millie Bobby Brown as 11, she's a wonderful actress. So the whole cast does a great job, and it's cool to see them grow up with the show, with us. So I'm very much looking forward to season 5. Dahmer was one of the most well-acted shows this year, with Evan Peters playing Jeffrey Dahmer and his dad, who's also the dad in Step Brothers. I forget his name, but that ending of episode 1 in Dahmer, where he finds out that his son not only raped and killed but also ate people, and how he has that little dilemma right there in the questioning room, was just it moved me, and it made me feel for this serial killer. And Evan Peters did that. I know the point of the show wasn't to make you feel bad for Jeffrey Dahmer, because he deserves to rot in hell for the rest of existence. But as an actor, you have to tell the story in a way that's going to get people to pay attention. And that's exactly what Evan Peters did. Probably the most no. Dahmer, going into it, I knew it was going to be good because Evan Peters is so fantastic. The most surprising show of the year is of how good it was, and my fourth and last honorable mention is Game of Thrones House of the Dragon. Now, I just got done with a rewatch of season 8 of Game of Thrones in its entirety, seasons 1 through 8. I just finished, I think, yesterday or 2 days ago. Maybe Christmas Eve day, I think I finished it. But regardless, seasons 1 through 6 are impeccable. Season 7 is good, but not great. And season 8 has its moments, but the last 2 episodes really fucking kill it. And people are very well in their right mind to say that the last season ruined Game of Thrones, because there were a lot of stupid things that were written into the story of Game of Thrones season 8. And going into House of the Dragon, it makes sense that people had that sour taste still in their mouths from season 8. In House of the Dragon, everyone was saying let's hope it's good. And it ended up being so good. I'm going to rewatch it because I just got done with Game of Thrones. I cannot wait for season 2. The guy who plays Daemon, Matt Smith, and the guy who plays Aemon, I think his name is Evan Mitchell or something like that. Emma Darcy or whoever plays Rhaenyra, older Rhaenyra, and whoever plays older Queen Alicent Hightower. Just perfect. It's perfect. It was the perfect season 1. It was one of the best season 1s I've ever watched. And I've seen a lot of season 1s. I am so excited for season 2. Because the Game of Thrones world has so much more to offer than what we were left with. And telling the stories of the Targaryens and their dragons is just such a good way to keep the Game of Thrones lore going. However, there was one show this year that surpassed all of those shows with what I say is the greatest villain in TV history, but also one of the greatest and most sophisticated and emotionally unstable villains we've ever seen. And that is The Boys Season 3. Of course, I'm talking about Homelander. The Boys Season 3 was so over the top and so just dumb in spots, in a good way, and funny. And then it had such emotional scenes that it almost was like, what am I watching right now? Is this supposed to be a comedy, a drama, a thriller, a superhero movie? Like, what is this supposed to be? It was everything lumped in one, and the way they ended the show with Homelander laser beaming that guy, that protester or whatever, in public, and people cheering him on, and him going, all right, and then his son giving a little smile was... and the music that was playing gives me goosies. Wow. It's just something else, man. It's something else. The Boys Season 3 was by far the best TV show of the year. Season 4 will be incredible, especially because Jeffrey D. Morgan is joining the cast. I hope Soldier Boy comes back because his character was amazing. And everybody had their arc. Everybody had their arc in season 3 of The Boys. So, The Boys season 3 is the 2022 Who Gives a Dram TV show of the year. Let's move on to MMA. KO of the year. I'm going to go through these quick because these are pretty simple. I've talked about all these in great length on the podcast, especially this one. I had a whole clip dedicated to this. The honorable mention of knockout of the year is Chandler versus Ferguson. I can tell you when that happened here in a sec. Let's see. That was UFC 274, Saturday, May 7th. Front kick, soccer kick to the dome piece that flatlined Tony Ferguson. I mean, was definitely the most exciting knockout, like the most action-packed knockout. But in any other year, that'd probably be knockout of the year. But there was a knockout this year that not only was knockout of the year, but for my money, the greatest knockout of all time with everything put together. And of course, I'm talking about Leon Edwards knocking out Kamaru Usman at UFC 278. Oh, no, that was a few months later. If Chandler Ferguson and Usman versus Edwards were on the same card and they both had these knockouts, it'd be the greatest card of all time. But UFC 278, August 20th, Edwards versus Usman. Coincidentally, the August 20th was also the anniversary of Nate Diaz versus Conor McGregor 2 back in 2016. That was the greatest knockout of all time. And I still stand by it months later, 4 months later. The fact that Leon Edwards was losing very badly on the scorecards with a minute left and was able to land a perfectly placed head kick to the number one pound-for-pound fighter in the world, one of the greatest, if not the greatest welterweight of all time, was just watching that in my cousin's basement that night and going absolutely insane. I will never forget that. I will never forget that. So I'm choosing Leon Edwards versus Kamaru Usman as the knockout of the year. I don't think it's particularly close. Submission of the year was a little bit more difficult. There were two that I was fighting over. I ended up giving the honorable mention to Islam Makhachev versus Charles Oliveira back just a few months ago, where Islam choked out Charlie Olives in the second round, I think. But to go along with what was almost fight of the year for me, Jiri versus Glover Teixeira, UFC 275, June 11th. Jiri's last-second submission over Glover to win the UFC light heavyweight championship. Just one of the best fights we've ever seen. It was an incredible light heavyweight matchup, and that last-minute submission versus a guy in Glover Teixeira who is the blackest of black belts in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu was impressive to say the least. And that goes, so Jiri versus Glover, UFC 275, was my 2022 submission of the year. And that goes right into my fight of the year. This one might be a little bit controversial to you MMA fans out there, but I had Jiri versus Glover as the honorable mention here. Reason being, my fight of the year, I really enjoyed the fight that I picked because it was such a, who am I rooting for here? Because I kind of like both of these guys, but I kind of don't like both of these guys. And I had no idea what I wanted. And that is Dustin Poirier versus Michael Chandler, where Dustin Poirier ended up winning in round number 3. And that was at, what event was that? That was UFC 281, Saturday, November 12th. Dustin Poirier won by submission in round 3. And the reason that was the fight of the year, because it was just so action-packed. The first round was incredible. Second round was a little boring. Michael Chandler just kind of stayed on top of Dustin Poirier. But then round number 3 again, just standing and banging. That's what Michael Chandler does, for better or for worse. He's like the new age Justin Gaethje. And he loses a lot, but he's exciting, which, still gets him main card status. But I picked Dustin Poirier versus Michael Chandler as my fight of the year. That is probably the pick on my awards here that is the most controversial, but I decided just to go with it. And then last but not least in MMA, fighter of the year. My honorable mention, I had somebody who had a really impressive year, although I think his stoppage to win the title was a little bit early, looking back on that fight, is Alex Pereira. Knocked out Sean Strickland and TKO'd Israel Adesanya on the books. Now, I think that stoppage was maybe a little premature, but nonetheless, he's the champion, and he's really good, and he had a really good year. He admittedly had a really good year. I think if he rematches Izzy for the title again, Izzy will win. I've said that on the podcast, but Pereira deserves his due. He had a really incredible year this year, and 2 knockouts versus 2 top-tier middleweights is enough to put you into Fighter of the Year status. But the Fighter of the Year, although he only fought once, the lasting image that he provided MMA as a sport, the fact that he did what he did makes him the Fighter of the Year, and that's Leon Edwards. The fact that he went in, I can't stress this enough, that he went in against the number 1 pound-for-pound fighter in the world, consensus. He's been the number 1 pound-for-pound for a very long time. Consensus, the greatest, if not the second greatest welterweight of all time. I don't think many people would argue that. He's either the greatest or right behind George St. Pierre. Losing the fight in round 5 with a minute to go. And Kamaru Usman had beaten Leon Edwards prior. All of that mixed in, and Leon Edwards was still able to land that beautiful head kick, makes him the fighter of the year. I don't care if he only fought once. The fact that he was able to do what he did in the situation is the most. I haven't seen anything more impressive since McGregor knocked out Aldo in 13 seconds. Those are the two knockouts where you can say those are the greatest knockouts of all time. Edwards versus Usman, McGregor versus Aldo. And I don't think it's hard to argue against either of those two, I think. Rousey versus Holmes was a great knockout, but Holly Holm was destroying Ronda Rousey up to the knockout. And there are great knockouts, don't get me wrong, great knockouts, but the implications that each of those knockouts had for the sport of MMA and the way that they were performed was, I mean, it changed the entire MMA landscape. So, fighter of the year, Leon Edwards. So, shout out to you, Leon. I can't wait to watch you fight again. I was not a huge fan of you before this, especially after the Nate Diaz fight. But I'm on your side now. That was the greatest knockout I've ever seen in my entire life. Let's get into the whiskey, shall we? So just like last year when we did this, I have 3 categories. I think last year I had 4, but this year I just narrowed it down to 3. Best bang for your buck, most surprising dram, and the 2022 whiskey of the year. Now, I have 2 of the 3 bottles with me so we can pour them on camera. But I'm going to start with the best bang for your buck whiskey. And again, these are going to be whiskeys that I've had on the show, and also Bourbon with Friends counts as well. If I had them on Bourbon with Friends, then that counts. There's a lot of really good answers for this. When you think best bang for your buck, the first thing that comes to my mind is Evan Williams Bottled and Bond, and Wild Turkey Rare Breed. So I suppose those are my 2 honorable mentions. And they probably will be moving forward all the time. Finding Buffalo Trace at MSRP is also best bang for your buck. But again, I wanted to do something that I reviewed on the podcast, and I'm pretty sure I mentioned that this might be either most surprising or best bang for your buck during the podcast we did. And that whiskey, the whiskey that I'm picking for the best bang for your buck whiskey on the market that you can get, is my good friend Bruce Buffer's Puncher's Chance Bourbon. Now, clocking at 45% alcohol by volume, coming in at, I don't know, around $30. This is a bourbon that provides a subtle enough smoothness where it's going to be a good beginner bourbon. However, there's complexity in there that shows that what Umberto Lucchini and Bruce Buffer are doing with this liquid is not just a bid to make a little bit of extra money. This is something that's, especially with Umberto Lucchini behind the driver's wheel here, this is something that is going to be a player within the everyday bourbon drinker or everyday bourbon field for a very long time. I don't remember what I gave Puncher's Chance Bourbon. I'm sure it was high, but when I was going through what should be my my best bang for your buck whiskey this year, I was really thinking of what it should be. I had a few choices, but at the end of the day, I remember being incredibly impressed with this Puncher's Chance, and I remember being amazed at what the price would be. And talking with Bruce and Umberto on Bourbon with Friends, one of their things was we want, this could be a $50, $60 bourbon, $70 bourbon, but we're putting it at $30 to make it affordable. I don't know if I 100% agree with that, but I understand where they're coming from. I think it does hit above its price point. I don't know if I'd say $80, but it does hit above $30. And I would say if you can find Puncher's Chance for anywhere in that $30 range, then pick it up, and I don't think you'll be disappointed. So Puncher's Chance Bourbon is going to be the 2022 best bang for your buck whiskey. Moving on to the most surprising dram of 2022. I did have a very solid, I had two very solid honorable mentions for this. One was Puncher's Chance. I did not expect it to be as good as it was. I really didn't. I thought it was going to be just another, bid for, a name to make money, which is not a bad thing at all. A lot of people do it. But when I tasted the juice in here, it was evident that that wasn't the case. And another one, which I did on Bourbon with Friends, I have not done it on Who Gives a Dram yet. I'm planning on doing it Q1 of 2023, is Ben Holiday, which I don't have with me right now. No, I don't have it. Oh, it's somewhere here. I don't know where it is. But Ben Holiday, Missouri Bourbon. Just a classic heavy oak bourbon feel to it. And I had never even heard of it before this year. So, being able to talk to the guys over there and ladies at at Holiday Distillery was incredible. And I was incredibly surprised. A lot of the times when you're talking with someone who's from the company, you have to, I've never hated a whiskey, but sometimes you have to skate around the fact that it's not that good. With Ben Holiday, it was actually legitimately very, very good. So shout out to you guys over there, Ben Holiday. But my most surprising dram, and again, I don't have this with me, but we did it on the podcast, was Jack Daniel's Triple Mash. And I know it was Whiskey of the Year for something. I know Jack Daniel's Bottle and Bond won, or Bonded won Whiskey of the Year for Whiskey Advocate or something. I don't know, but I liked the Triple Mash better. It had a really unique palate to it that separated it from anything else I had had from Jack Daniel's, that I've ever had from Jack Daniel's. So, it was a whiskey that I was not expecting to like as much as I did. And I've seen Jack Daniel's Triple Mash available at a lot of different places. They're in 700 milliliter bottles, which is, it is what it is, but I see it quite often. So it's pretty widely available from what I can tell, and it's good. It's actually legitimately really good. So I chose Jack Daniel's Triple Mash for the 2022 most surprising dram of the year. If you can find it, buy it. It's one of the most unique whiskeys that I drank this year. But to close out the show, what we have here, the 2022 Whiskey of the Year. Now, I was torn between two options. Again, we had to have it on the show. And I ended up choosing the one that in my heart I feel is the right choice. My honorable mention for 2002 Whiskey of the Year was Russell's Reserve 13 Year, which we did fairly recently on the show, but I had a little bit on the night before Christmas Eve, the 23rd. I had a little bit of Russell's Reserve 13 and very much enjoyed it. It's incredibly delicious, and especially at barrel proof 13-year age statement, it honestly doesn't get much better. However, the whiskey that I'm choosing as Whiskey of the Year was something that blew me away and continues to blow me away. I chose to drink it on Christmas Eve so I could get reacquainted with exactly what it tastes like for this show. I will 1,000% buy another bottle once this is gone, because I'm about halfway through this bottle right now. And I've never had this type of whiskey before I drank this, and it just changed my perspective on what good whiskey is. And my choice for the 2022 Who Gives a Dram Whiskey of the Year is Penelope American Light Whiskey. Coincidentally, also aged 13 years. This, coming in at 128.9 proof, does not drink anything like 128.9 proof. This is one of the quote-unquote smoothest whiskeys that I've ever tasted. It is dessert in a bottle heavily. It's like creme brulee, vanilla, all of what you want in a whiskey, Penelope Light American Light Whiskey is. I'm going to pour some right now to have on the show. There's that. Shout out to my brother Kale for getting me these new Who Gives a Dram Glencairn glasses. I'm going to use this. And just a little pour to commemorate the whiskey of the year. And it also helps that Mike and Danny over at Penelope are two incredible people. And I love them. They're just great guys that are making whiskey for the correct purpose. But this American Light Whiskey, man, see, on the nose, you get like that really robust fruit note, along with all of these nice vanillas, like vanilla extract. You get like a burnt sugar cookie. You get like just so many sweet goodness notes. And this has been open for a bit, so I was able to breathe and get some alcohol or get some oxygen throughout the liquid, and it's only helped soften the alcohol vapors in there. So what you're getting in a bottle that's been halfway empty for about 6 months now is pleasant, light, sugary candy notes. It's so inviting. So inviting. And then this is my first drink of whiskey today, so the proof does hit. The 130 proof does hit if this is your first drink of whiskey, but what gets me is the aftertaste. The finish. It's so hot, but there's I'm getting Christmas cookie right now. I'm getting frosting. I'm getting like the burnt top of creme brulee. It's just so dessert and so good, and I was not expecting Penelope American Light Whiskey to be anywhere near this good. The Architect builds 1 and 2 are fantastic. Their 4-grain, their regular straight bourbon is fantastic. All of what Penelope does, their toasted barrel strength, is all great. But this, I think, can be one of those whiskeys that is just the premier. This is the William LaRue Weller of Penelope. And what Mike and Danny have going on with this American Light Whiskey is something that I think is one of the most impressive bottles on the market with any distillery. Not just craft, not just bourbon, not just rye. Any distillery out there in any region, Penelope American Light Whiskey makes its mark. And that is why I chose it as the 2022 Who Gives a Dram Whiskey of the Year. There we go. I'm going to finish this Penelope. But I want to end the show by saying, once again, thank you guys so much for supporting me in 2022. You downloaded my show tens of thousands of times. You made me chart in countries I didn't even know people would listen to me. You helped me grow as a podcaster, as a whiskey enthusiast, and as a person. And I do this show, and I put as much time and effort into this show because of people like you who is watching or listening that support me and my ventures. You know, you guys get a lot of me. You get me twice a week at the very least, between Who Gives a Dram and Bourbon with Friends. So to that I say thank you very much. I'm very honored to do Who Gives a Dram. I'm incredibly excited to see what 2023 brings. But 2022 will be a year I will never forget. It was the year I grew my wings, quite literally, by getting on a plane for the first time. Meeting Paul, joining Bourbon with Friends in real life, you know, growing both these podcasts to be forces to be reckoned with, I like to think. And just having a fun time. That's the biggest thing. I have a very fun time doing this. I have this incredible equipment now that allows me to take this to the next level. And that's exactly what I plan on doing. So, if you haven't, make sure you're following me on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and TikTok is all at Who Gives a Dram. Make sure you're subscribed to the show on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Go on YouTube, subscribe to the channel, like the videos, comment on the videos, and click the bell notification so that way you are notified when I post a new video once a week for the most part, sometimes twice a week. And that's going to do it for the new year. So be safe on New Year's Eve, you guys. Don't be stupid. We'll be back next week. And next time I'll talk to you guys next year. Ha ha ha. No. I'm very, very thankful. All these recap shows. This is the second one I've done, like after a full year of content, are always tough because I start to think about the year and all the good things that have happened, and I get a little bit emotional because it's had a lot of tough things happen, with my Uncle Craig passing away and, just life in general. But I could always lean on Who Gives a Dram, and I could always lean on Bourbon with Friends to kind of get me out of a rut and get my mind onto, creating content and to being the best podcaster that I can be. I feel like a lot of times when people say they're podcasters, other people are like, oh, like, so you have 2 listeners and, you do it about comedy or something when, I have dedicated so much time to learning about whiskey and allowing myself to listen to people who know a lot more than me, which is a lot of people, most people, to be honest. And I just can't wait to see where we go in 2023. So cheers to you guys. Thank you so much again. And always remember, whiskey's the water of life. So let's start living.